California ASG chapters here. We welcome you. Let's see, that would be Redding, Lake, Placerville, Sacramento, Walnut Creek, Alameda, and San Jose. So welcome. We also invited members, and I have heard from many of you that you are here, members of Santa Rosa Quilt Guild, Moonlight Quilters, Extreme Quilters, Ladies of the Lake, the Pointless Sisters, Petaluma Quilt Guild, Pacific Peacemakers, and the Grapevine Quilters. So welcome everybody. So during the presentation, we're asking that everybody except the co-hosts and me, please mute and turn off your video. And the reason is that that makes it so that there's less bandwidth. And people who have poor internet connections get a better viewing experience that way, less stuttering, etc. If you need to ask a question, please do so either in the chat or hold it until the question and answer at the end. Leslie will be monitoring the chat, and if there's something that she feels that we should interrupt, then she will do so. And so, Leslie, are we recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so let me put the camera on. Nope, wrong camera. There's John. Okay, our speaker today is John Furtado of Village Sewing Centers here in Santa Rosa and Ukiah. He's going to be talking about vintage sewing machines, and in the old store on Santa Rosa Avenue, I used to love to walk around the store and look at all the machines. They were lower down. Now he has them up on a high shelf, so I don't get to do that anymore. But they're beautiful, and I was admiring the ones that he has here. We all know John because his shop is one of our preferred places to purchase machines and take our machines when they need servicing and purchase fabric and sewing supplies. John is a pillar of our sewing community, and he was the organizer for one of the mask making distribution efforts for the North Bay. And I'd like to take this moment to thank you, John, for all that you did and all that you do and your efforts on behalf of all of us. So anyway, I see people in the audience, they're all muted, so they don't hear them, but I can see them clapping. So anyway, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Hi, and everybody. Oh.
Can everybody hear John?
Can you hear me okay?
Leslie, could you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's fine.
All right, I'll try to speak up. I'm not the world's best public speaker. I'm much better at fixing sewing machines than public speaking. I'll tell you that for sure. But we'll fumble our way through it. I'll take you on a little tour of some of our antique sewing machines. My background a bit, I've been in this industry for 21 years, and it was pretty early on that I fell in love with antique sewing machines. They have so much personality. Machines today, I love them. They're fine. They're what I would want to sew on a modern machine for sure, but they don't have personality like this. These were works of art. I mean, just beautiful machines. And when you go back 150 years, there was a lot of sewing machine companies back then, a lot. And it's sad to say that most of them didn't survive the Great Depression, and they kind of fell away. But let me show you a few. And then also too, just before I get too far into antique sewing machines, I just want to thank everybody out there. Sonoma County, Northern California, we have the best customers in the world, and they've been so supportive of us. It's been very difficult during COVID. And if you don't live in this area, it's not unique to us. Every sewing machine store in the country, probably the world, is pretty overwhelmed right now. We went from having 5 repairs come into our shop every day to having 30 come in every single day. And it's been tough to keep up. I actually hired a whole staff of people to help me get on top of this. But everybody out there, wherever you shop for your sewing machines and go in for repairs, just be patient with them. We're all working really hard. It's pretty overwhelming. But thank you all for your continued support. We've been very fortunate that we're surviving COVID, and this is a scary time for small businesses. And I worry about what it's going to be like when COVID's over. But anyway, thank you guys for your support, for sure. Okay, let's get into the world of antique sewing machines. So if we go back 150 years, like I was saying, there was a lot of sewing machine companies. Around 1850 is when we start seeing sewing machines start being produced. Singer wasn't a big player when sewing machines first started showing up. There was other companies who were doing things beyond Singer. Singer was really good at finding out what worked for other people and making it work for them. They were kind of masters at it. And these 2 machines are a good example of that. So we're going to start here with one of my favorites, which is Wilcox and Gibbs. I'm actually fortunate to own 3 of these machines. These are the most collected antique sewing machine, is the Wilcox and Gibbs. And I think it's because they're so iconic looking. When you look at this just screams 1800s, and this is beautiful work of art. Now, the earliest of the Wilcox and Gibbs machines were hand crank. Those were some of the first ones. So it would have been hand crank. They use actually glass tension plates, which is really interesting. And then they have ones that were in a treadle stand, which I have actually over there. So those were common. Then later on, we start seeing electric motors. Now, I love this machine because this has a very early electric motor. And this electric motor is really interesting because it works on both AC and DC. Probably means nothing to a lot of people, but it's actually really interesting because back in the 1800s, the way that our electricity comes out of our wall, that wasn't standardized, and there was a big battle between Edison and Tesla over DC versus AC. And this motor actually works on both because they didn't really know what was going to be kind of the standard or what someone's house may have had at the time. So this is actually really, really cool. But so this machine is a chain stitch machine. So this means it is no bobbin in this machine. It runs with a single spool of thread and does a single thread chain stitch machine. We have chain stitch machines today. They're built into overlocks now. So if you had a 5-thread overlock machine, it has a chain stitch function, but it's different because it uses 2 threads, which is technically a better system because it's a tighter lock stitch. Single thread were fine, but they could easily unravel if the thread broke. The good example is this would be the type of system that would be on those old charcoal bags when you would buy a bag of charcoal. You would have to find that one thread to pull and then the whole bag would come apart. That's a single thread chain stitch. So what happens is when the needle goes down, a little rotating hook grabs the needle thread and starts bringing it around. When it brings it around, the needle's penetrating its loop and then it re-grabs that loop and kind of like almost like knitting almost. So we have this little chain stitch. What I love about this machine is very old. This machine is easily 130 years old, but it still works. Everything about it works. But you want a difficult sewing machine to thread? This is a hard one to thread, believe me. There is a lot of different paths on this, but I thought I would give a little demonstration on how this machine sounds and how it runs. See if I can do it backwards. I can't do it backwards, I lost my thread. Let me see if I can rethread it really quick. Let me turn it around. I had a beautiful chain stitch this morning when I was testing this, but let me just put it back to the needle eye. The cool thing too is how inventive it was. Let me show you the foot control, if you can see this. It actually looked like a foot. But everything about old machines had personality and care in their design. They were an important appliance for people in their home. Every home would have had a sewing machine of some sort in it. There we go. So this has a very old needle in it. The needles on antique sewing machines are very hard to come by. They're not standardized. Sewing machines didn't standardize their needles until about the 1930s. And then everybody ended up going to the same needle. So then, I don't know if you can see, outside of the fact that the needle is really dull, it actually does a really great little stitch on it. The way that the chain stitch machines work is the top looks like a normal sewing machine stitch, but the bottom, it's a lot thicker because it's tripled over, because it's catching itself and catching itself and catching itself. So the stitch itself is actually incredibly strong. It's not going to pull out. And what they would have you do is you would leave the fabric, so you get a chain, kind of like on an overlock machine, and that would help to keep the stitch from unraveling. Or if you got it long enough, you can actually tie it or go back in with it. So these were actually really nice because they were affordable. Most people could get into these, and you're working with a single thread, which sounds amazing today if we could only work with a single thread and never have to deal with a bobbin again. And that was kind of this system, and it worked really good. Wilcox and Gibb, interesting enough, was around for a very long time. So the company first came around in the mid 1800s. They were located in New York, and then they did, I think, most of their manufacturing in Pennsylvania. They ended up opening headquarters in London, but everything, even though they had a big headquarters in London, all the manufacturing was still done in the United States and sent overseas and distributed from there around the world. They had distributorship all over the place. I thought they disappeared. I thought they just went away with, like a lot of the companies. I was actually, when I did a little research on these machines, was very surprised to find out that Wilcox and Gibb operated until the 1970s. They just got into, they went in a slightly different direction from targeting the home market to targeting more the commercial side of sewing. So things that people don't necessarily realize, you have your sewing machine and you have your overlock machine. Overlocks are as old as sewing machines. Did you know that sergers have been around since the 1800s also? We didn't know about them. They were in the commercial world. It wasn't until Baby Lock, Juki, which was Juki Baby Lock, they introduced the home serger in the 1960s, and it revolutionized that industry. And so now everybody, for years, generically called every brand of serger a Baby Lock, even though it could have been a Husqvarna or it could have been a Bernina, because that's how big that name was with overlocks. So the Juki company really is what brought overlocks to the forefront. But overlocks, going back in time, they've been around. They've been around since the 1800s. Wilcox and Gibbs actually made some really, really early overlock machines for commercial use. And so then their business kind of went more into the commercial business production part of sewing, and they lasted to the 1970s, and then they kind of disappeared. So they have a really, really interesting history, but a very, very iconic machine. So I have three of these. I have one in the table. I have another one just like this, but it's just the machine head. And then I got this one, and I can't tell you how happy I was to get this machine, because I got everything. I got its little box of attachments. I can geek out over this stuff quite a bit. I have its original box. This is how you would have got it when you bought it 150 years ago. It's fantastic, and I love all this. It's all dusty, but you look at these, you can see this was shipped, and it just takes you back in time. I don't know if you can read the writing on the top of it, but you picture this like on a train, going to somebody's farm, and just so amazing. And then when I open it up, I actually have a very pristine book for the machine. And of course, the very great foot control. The way that it worked is the motor itself plugged right into the foot control, and then the foot control plugged into the outlet in the wall. So yeah, just fantastic. But this is heavy, feels like an iron. I think you have an iron here, but this fit in the box, and that's how they would ship them around the world. So yeah, fantastic that I have that. Just this is one of my favorites, and I don't think I'll ever get rid of this one. And everything's original. The wires are all original, which could be a little scary, but I'm not going to ever rewire this one. I'm gonna keep it exactly how it is. So I'm gonna unplug this now, so that we don't have a big fire. Okay, that's unplugged. Okay, so then I was saying that Singer was really good at seeing what other companies did and making it work for them. Singer was fantastic at all of their marketing, but this is a really good example. This is essentially what Wilcox and Gibbs invented. They saw the popularity in it and the marketability, and so they put their Singer spin on it, market this. And this one is not near as old as the Wilcox and Gibbs. This machine is from the 1920s, so they kept this chain stitch style around for quite a long time. You don't see much beyond the 1920s on these chain stitch machines for home use. They really fell away to the more traditional lock stitch machines. Where you did see them a lot though, this is the exact same principle that all of the kids' sewing machines were from the 1930s through the 60s. All of those little tiny toy ones that hand crank, this is how they operate. Just the same, single needle chain stitch machine, which was great for little girls, but maybe not as ideal for your serious sewers. They wanted now the more modern lock stitch machines. So let me show you another machine that is also one of my favorites in my collection, and I am fortunate to have two of these machines, and they actually have a really neat history. So it's actually in a big treadle stand over here. What I can do is I can bring this back a little bit too. Okay. So I have two of these. This I think is my favorite because this one's in its original table. The other one I have, I just have the head. The other one I had was really bad shape, and I had to completely rebuild it, but it's working again.
I'm going to switch cameras.
Okay.
Okay, so we're on this camera.
Okay.
And
Okay. So, and then we might actually do a close-up in a minute because there's a really neat mechanism on this machine. This is the Davis sewing machine here, the Davis Sewing Machine Company. They have a really interesting history also. They are also a company that started in New York, where I think a lot of the American sewing machine companies came out of New York. This sewing machine, the idea of this sewing machine first came around 1860. This machine is not from 1860. This is one of the later ones. But it's a very interesting machine. So when we think about a built-in walking foot or an upper feed on a sewing machine, the first sewing machine that comes to mind is Pfaff, right? Pfaff has a long history of having their walking foot integrated into their sewing machine. They've had a walking foot in their machine going back to the end of the 1970s is when we first saw it in a Pfaff sewing machine, which would have been the Pfaff 1222, which is one of their more iconic machines. And there is just tons of them still sewing today because they were very well built machines, but people fell in love with that upper feed system, and Pfaff owned it. There was their patent. They had it for many, many decades until, I want to say 15 years ago. And now it's really nice. We see that style of upper feed now pretty much with every sewing machine company out there. Bernina did a really nice job of building an upper feed system on their machine. I like theirs a lot because they copied what Pfaff had done over the years and knew that worked and kind of stuck with that. So we see it on Bernina, we see it on Janome systems, a little bit different, but they have an upper feed integrated into their machine. Husqvarna now has it on some of their machines. So it's a really nice, important feature. To make a long story short, that upper feed started in 1860. That's how long ago it was. That's how unusual this machine was. This is a vertical feed machine. This machine has no feed teeth whatsoever. Everything happens on the top of the fabric. So a man back on the East Coast came up with this idea, and of course needed to get some backers for it, and he did. And they started to produce the Davis vertical feed sewing machines out of New York. Waterford, New York, actually. And the machines were very, very popular in the late 1800s. One of the most popular sewing machines actually in the United States for a long time. The reason why they were so popular is they were marketed as being able to sew more layers together than other sewing machines at its time. And they were also marketed as being able to sew without pre-basting. And the reason they were able to do that is their very unique system. So let me turn this and you guys can get a really good look at what's happening. You kind of look, you have to look at it sideways. Can you see this part of the machine okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happens, let me actually grab a piece of fabric. We're not actually gonna sew, but so on the bottom of the plate, it's perfectly smooth. So there is absolutely no feed dogs. And how this machine feeds is where the basically the presser foot goes, pushes on the fabric, the needle enters the fabric, and then the fabric moves back while the needle is in it.
I'm gonna do a close-up.
Okay.
Let's see if I get closer.
So you can see how this is basically it's walking the fabric. So the needle penetrates, the 2 feet together pull back with the needle in the fabric through all the layers as the other foot raises up. So it is a walking foot machine. So upper feed has been around since 1860, but then went away when the Davis Sewing Machine Company went away. The interesting thing is this model right here, this lives in industrial sewing machines today. They're compound walking foot with needle feed. This system works so well that if you were to buy an industrial machine to make horse blankets or to do car upholstery, those really heavy duty machines that have to do that serious sewing through all those layers, this is the exact system they use, you know, the engineering up top, but the principle here is exactly the same. The only thing they did different is they also have lower feed with it too. So really the combination of the two, top feed and bottom feed together, ideal, right? But back in this time period, this was really revolutionary, and it delivered on what they promised, because the needle will penetrate every layer of fabric. So if you had 10 layers of fabric, that needle is through all 10, and it's going to drag all 10 back at the exact same time. You also had the ability to do some adjusting. There's these little things that would adjust the height of the foot for, see, when I move this, see how this changes? So if I had a lot of layers, I could crank this up, which made the top foot walk even higher as it's dragging back. Is this cool or what? The first time I saw a Davis vertical feed machine, it was probably 15 years ago. It blew my mind. I had no idea that this would have existed that long ago. So, so the Davis Sewing Machine Company has a really, really interesting history. So let me turn this back around so you can see the front of it. They were out of Waterford, New York, became hugely successful. I mean, one of the most successful sewing machine companies in the United States in the 1800s. Their machines were built extremely well, and they did really clever marketing. For instance, one of the things I read about them is the local fire station. They started a band and they made all of the clothes for the band, and it was called the Davis Sewing Machine Band. And this band of musicians that were all firefighters, they were very, very good. So it wasn't just gimmicky. They were really good. And they toured all around the United States and they won many competitions. But that was marketing for them. They knew it was marketing. So they were very clever, really clever with their marketing. So they were cranking out machines. Their demand skyrocketed. Their demand was more than they could actually handle. So when companies have that happen, where all of a sudden there's this huge boom and everybody wants their product, they have to increase production. So they start building new factories and they start making changes and bringing new people in. Well, a couple things happened. Unfortunately, I think, ramped up a little bit too fast and their quality started to go down, and people noticed that. The other thing that happened to them is back in this time period, when you would buy a sewing machine, you would buy a table usually to go with it, unless it was a portable machine. But you would get some sort of table, and the table was made by the manufacturer of the sewing machine, which is so different today. So your table was uniquely paired to your sewing machine. So to keep up with the demand, the Davis Sewing Machine, actually, they bought a company who made furniture. And so when they bought that company, they stretched their finances a little bit too thin, and they had a hard time coming back from that. Then they ended up trying to save money by leaving New York, which was very sad because Waterford, New York, at that time relied on this company. This company was Waterford, New York. So the foundry, they didn't own a foundry that could make the casings for the machine. That was next to them, which was a different company. So they supported that company, and they supported many of the local companies in Waterford. And it was really sad when they up and left that area, because it caused a huge depression there, because all those businesses were in a bind. So anyway, they moved to Dayton, Ohio. And kept production going there. And this is not a New York built machine. This is one from Dayton, Ohio. So is my other one, unfortunately, because it's not the golden years of the Davis Sewing Machine Company. But when they went there, they were overstretched financially. They were dealing with a bogus lawsuit from a hat making company who stole one of their patents, but tied them up in court for years and years and years. And they eventually won that, but it devastated the company, and they couldn't come back from it. And then they ended up closing in the 1920s, and the vertical feed machines all disappeared. And that was it for them, which was it was a shame that happened, because I would have loved to have seen what this company would have been like today as a modern company, working on this for 150 years. What this could have become technology-wise would have been fantastic. But what a cool machine! I'm absolutely in love with these machines, and they stitch quite well. I've done not on this one, but on my other one that I rebuilt. I did a lot of sewing on it just to play and test it out. Now, this is back in the vintage of, see if I can open this up, of long bobbin machines. Long bobbin machines were really the standard in the 1800s. Almost everybody operated with some sort of a long bobbin. So long bobbins, they're also generically called bullet bobbins, because their shuttle looks like a bullet. And so the bobbins, they're long bobbins because they look like long spools, because they are. And you would have some sort of elaborate bobbin winder over here that you would put this in, and it would have to kind of move the thread back and forth to fill the spool, and then you had to put it in here and click it in. The neat thing with this is they were extremely reliable, a little bit noisier than what came later on, because they kind of oscillated back and forth. But the bobbin case and the whole shuttle system for the machine was one unit. So bobbin case and shuttle, this is the whole thing. Basically what happens is when the needle penetrates the fabric, needles always penetrate and pull up. That makes a little loop of thread behind the needle. And then in some way, something grabs that loop of thread. In this case, this shuttle would come glide through the loop of thread, and then it would pull up and form a stitch, and it would retract back, and then it would glide through the loop of thread. So it was a very simple system. The system hardly ever failed. They were pretty bulletproof. But long bobbins they're fun. If you've never sewn on one, at some point you should, because they're kind of a neat system. But their stitch quality was always really good. But it was just, I think the biggest annoyance with a long bobbin machine is just getting the bobbins wound in a nice way. And loading these can be a little bit tricky. The sad thing with long bobbin machines, when we get these as antiques, probably 20% of them, these are gone. And maybe a kid was playing with them 100 years ago or something. They're just gone. And these are unique to the machine. So I can't take a long bobbin from a Singer and put it in a Davis machine. I can't take this one and put it in a Singer. They're different. Their angles are different. The lengths are different. They're just not gonna jive. So it's sad when that particular part of the machine is missing. But so you would load your bobbin and you would just drop this into the machine, which everything is so awkward when you're at funny angles, but let me try this again. And then you would close your little cover, and that's it. It was done. And then it would just grab and form its stitch. So long bobbins, long bobbins were the standard for a long time. And you can see it on pretty much, I think, every machine I have over here, with the exception of those, is a long bobbin style machine. So long bobbins, they lasted in the antique world.
Everybody close your eyes. I'm going to be moving the camera. I don't want you to get motion sickness.
They were in the sewing machine world up until, I want to say, we started to see them disappear around the 1920s. Around the 1920s, the long bobbin machines were kind of drying up. There was better technology out there in the 1920s. But this is another example of a long bobbin machine. And this machine, so another bullet bobbin. This machine is another one of my favorites. And I have a pretty big collection of antique sewing machines. I have a lot in this store, and then I have a handful up in our Ukiah store, and then honestly, some of my favorites are at home, but I didn't bring them in. They decorate my house. But this one is one of my favorites because one reason is we've been a long time FOF dealer, so I love anything old that we sell. But another reason is you don't see antique FOFs here. I'm sure if I travel Europe and look in antique stores, I'd probably see a lot more antique FOFs. But in the United States, this is not common. This may be, I believe this is the first one in my 21 years that I've come across. So, and I like the less common when it comes to antiques. I see so many of the 1920s to 1960s singers that I'm a little jaded, I think, when it comes to those. But anything unusual, anything I don't see, I love it. And I love this machine for a number of reasons. One, yeah, it's FOF. This would have come, of course, from Germany. So it traveled a long ways to get to the United States. And it's just really pretty. You know, all of the work on it is just beautiful leafing. And you can tell that this machine was loved. Somebody really liked to sew on this machine probably 100 years ago. Again, this machine is not as old as these other machines, even though it kind of has that same look and feel. I believe this machine is probably around 1915, a little bit harder to get a really good gauge, but I do not believe this machine is from the 1800s at all. I'm almost 100% sure that it's from the 1900s, but has just a really pretty look. But again, you can see everything is worn off right here, not over here, but here. And that's just years of fabric moving across this. I mean, this is a lot of sewing right here to get that to wear so cleanly and so smooth. It didn't wear away because they stored it badly or anything. This is nice and smooth. This is just fabric dragging across this, which is great. I would love, wouldn't you love to be able to see some of the things that were built on these machines? But even the detail on the cabinet is really nice, has a nice ruler across the front. And I love that I actually have the lid that says off on it, has a little chink right there. And I have the original oiler, and I love that too, when someone has cared so much for the machine that they kept it complete. So this I really love, just because you never see these here. Never see old Foss. You never see old Husqvarnas either. My aunt actually had a Husqvarna from I believe around 1860, a really old one. It was such a cool looking machine, but very, very simple. And it had a flower name, because Husqvarna did flower names for 100 years. But I can't remember what it was, but it was a beautiful, beautiful machine. Husqvarna has a really interesting history with their machines. I don't have one to show you, but I'll just tell you a little bit about the company. Husqvarna company, of course, it's a Swedish company. It's named after the region in Sweden that the factory is in, which is Husqvarna, Sweden. But the things that people don't necessarily know about Husqvarna is they are over 300-year-old company. That company started in the 1600s, and that's how long it's been around. They started in the 1600s making rifles, and you can still find Husqvarna rifles, but they dabbled in just about everything. I mean, anything for the home, Husqvarna made, and they did some really odd stuff too in the 1960s and 70s. I saw pictures of some pretty odd things that they were making, but of course modern Husqvarna is a little different than old Husqvarna, but that's how long the company has been around for a very long time. But yeah, that's just kind of the history of Husqvarna. But let me show you a couple other really cool machines. So all these machines aren't necessarily my prettiest machines, but I think for me they are some of my most interesting machines. Okay, this machine I think is absolutely beautiful. So much about this machine that I love.
In frame. We're in frame now.
So this is an early Singer. This machine is from 1889. Not the earliest of Singers, of course, but it is a very old Singer. Being that this machine is from 1889, I don't think it was as well loved for sewing as this Pfaff was, because it still has all of its details on it. I would have expected a machine that is over 130 years old to not have any of this left. So either Singer did some amazing job with their lacquer or something to seal this up where it never wore away, or whoever owned this didn't sew as serious, and it was maybe just a nice pretty thing to have in their house that they used every once in a while to mend. That's my guess. They're probably old menders and not making little girls dresses or quilting or any of the things that people used to do. But this is a machine that is a very old machine in my collection that is in such nice condition with its paint on its bed. The bed's the first thing that wears away. So I love that I have that. I love that it's of the vintage of the violin shape. The violin shape is iconic on old Singers. So kind of has that curviness to it. That was unique to them. That was their kind of iconic shape. Now, this machine is from the 1800s. It does not use a long bobbin. So Singer was really good with seeing what was out there technology-wise and trying to expand on it. And this was a really good direction that Singer went in, and I think it really helped boost their company quite a bit, is because they experimented with different shuttle systems. So this has a round bobbin, but you can't see it, but it's a really, really unique hook system. It looks so odd when you see it. It is one where the bobbin case and shuttle are one unit. So the bobbin goes into this bobbin case that has a hook on it and is going to rotate and grab the thread, but it sits vertically instead of sitting horizontal. So this was a really unique design for its time period, for sure. But the ornateness is just really, really great. I like this machine too, because Singer has an interesting history on originally, American company, stayed an American company for a very long time, but they did a lot of their manufacturing in Great Britain and Scotland, actually. I actually have friends in Scotland, and they talk about the Singer sewing machines was such a big deal in Scotland. And when I was there, got to see a lot of antique sewing machines as I would travel around Edinburgh. But yeah, so this actually was manufactured in Scotland back in this time period. But yeah, just a really, really, really neat sewing machine. The great thing too with these machines is they all work. Nothing that you have today, as great as they are, nobody's going to be sewing on those things in 150 years. I don't even think they're going to exist. They'll be recycled a long time ago. They're not as pretty and iconic to hold around as hold on to as some of these old guys. But as the mechanical guy that I am, I love looking at the underneath. This system here. They kept this for Singer used this system, I want to say, up until at least the 1980s on a lot of machines. This became very common to see an underneath of a lot of the machines. Not all of them, but a lot of them that kind of had a look like this. But yeah, really cool machine. And of course, I love any time that I get the tops. Because these usually are often broken somewhere or lost in history. The machine on this one is really it's a really pretty machine, but the cabinet is fairly plain, which is not that unusual for this time period. But cabinets a lot of times are where the sewing machine companies would make their a little extra money, a little like tack on to the sale. So you had the sewing machine head, and maybe they had a couple head styles, but it was really common that they was very limited on what they had here. Where you would, as a salesperson, get a little extra income would be on the cabinet. How many drawers do you want on your cabinet? Do you want a door that opens and closes? How ornate do you want the cabinet to be? There would always be the base model cabinet, the more affordable cabinet, and then the more expensive cabinet. And if you ever did any research on the price difference that someone would spend on a sewing machine that was in a basic cabinet to a sewing machine that was in a more ornate cabinet with more drawers, it was substantial. It could almost triple the price they were paying for the machine. So it was a lot about the cabinet But this is, yeah, this is a more simple, simple design cabinet. One little drawer in here. And I got all of its little knickknacks, and I still have its box full of attachments. Another thing too that is really interesting when you research old sewing machines, the different sewing machine companies had different attachments because they held patents on these attachments. They spent, because the sewing machines at this time period, sewing machines were kind of sewing machines. They all did the same thing. I mean, this is pre-zigzag. They all did a straight stitch. They all fed the fabric, one way or another. They all were kind of similar in that way. But what could make a sewing machine company stand out would be their attachments that they would work with. So they would own patents on these really unusual attachments. Like, I'm looking at this going, I have no idea. I don't know what this is for. A lot of them I can identify. Could be something that folds the fabric over and hems it. The interesting thing too with that, with the Davis vertical feed machine that we talked about earlier, one of the things it got in trouble with was it actually held a lot of patents on their attachments, and they had a special attachment that would make the sweatband in hats. And it was a really, really good attachment. Well, that was their patent. They owned it. Well, another company somehow acquired something to do with it and started to use it to manufacture the sweatbands and hats. So it was a huge hat manufacturer. So they got tied up in lawsuits and they fought over this. Well, in the meantime, the hat manufacturer, he just kept producing his hats and just making them. And the lawsuit went on for so long that they estimated that the hat manufacturer, before he was forced to stop using this device that Davis sewing machine, this attachment that they came up with, he had already made $1 million off of his hats. And it was a huge loss for the Davis sewing machine company, even though they eventually won. So a lot of times it was these type of attachments that would be unique and uniquely patented to the different sewing machine companies. But it's always kind of neat when I see these attachments. I get people who bring in boxes that they got from their grandma and with their antique sewing machine, and they want to know what all the attachments are for. and I look at them going, yeah, they're neat to maybe know, but you're never going to use these attachments. They are so funky to try to sew with and stuff. I love the old sewing machines, but when it comes to sewing, you probably want a modern machine if you're really going to be doing a lot of things with attachments. All right, so I'm going to show you another one over here, and this machine is ratty. It is not pretty at all, but this is the oldest machine in my collection. It would be extremely rare, I think, to see this machine. It is terrible looking. There is not one ornate thing on this machine. I would imagine at one point in time, there was probably something pretty about it. I think you can see something in the distance there. But what makes this machine so interesting is how old it is with the Singer Sewing Machine Company. This would have been some of their earliest machines. The patent that we see on this plate, the last patent date on this plate is 1855. So we're at the mid 1800s on this machine. Singer didn't start much before that. So this is a pretty unusual one for anybody to have, and I just happen to have it. And people ask me how I get these machines. I don't know. You work in an industry for so long, they just somehow they come to you. But yeah, this one came to me a number of years ago. But it's such an odd one. I don't even know what to do with it. I've been trying to move it along to somebody, but it's kind of ugly. So it's nothing you can sew with. It's missing its long bobbin, unfortunately, and it's not pretty. So, but it's interesting because this is what you would see. The interesting thing too, the long bobbin is gone, but its ghost remains. Can you see this on the table? that was it. Someone had it sitting there long enough for very many years, I would imagine, that would make a permanent imprint on the top of the cabinet. And then it went missing. Unfortunately, I wish I had it, because then we could actually sew on this machine and it would be a little bit more complete. But it's really sad. But it's funny that there it is, the ghost of the long bobbin. And this has a drawer. Why somebody never got to the point where they put it in the drawer, I don't know, because they even have some little attachments in there. But the neat thing with Singer is Singer had this iconic style, and you can see it from some of their earliest machines they ever made. This kind of shape to them, and we see this shape, right? That shape, it disappeared. It went away, and then Singer, had all their kind of more modern looking machines. Singer was really interesting because they weren't necessarily the best machine built, but they were the best marketed machine for sure. Their name, that Singer name, is one of the most recognized names in the entire world. You can travel just about anywhere and say Singer sewing machine, and they know exactly what you're referring to. So their name is really big. But so they had this iconic style to their machines, which fell away, and then they started to build other kinds of products. And most sewers know that for the last 40 years, you would never want to buy a Singer sewing machine because they got a little too comfortable with that name, that big giant name that people are going to buy no matter what because it's the Singer name. And they started to make really bad products, and they did that for a long time. But things that people may not realize, which I think is really exciting and really cool. We had a meeting with Singer. This was about, must be 5 years ago now. The company got purchased by a new owner, and the new owner wanted to make a lot of changes, and so brought in a new CEO to the company. And so the first thing the CEO did is, "Oh, fantastic! I'm gonna go work for the Singer sewing machine company. I'm gonna run the show." And didn't realize what the reputation of the Singer sewing machine company was when he came on board. He just knew his grandmother had a Singer sewing machine, but he never sewed with a Singer sewing machine. So then a good CEO, does polling and finds out the most he can about the product that he's going to be working with the company and developing, and finds out that Singer's reputation is the worst in the entire industry, that nobody speaks good of Singer sewing machines. And so he was shocked. He went and talked to the new owners and got a game plan on how they're going to fix Singer. And they are doing it, actually. They are working very, very hard. The changes that I've seen over the last 5 years with Singer has been substantial. And it's really interesting. I was a little like, oh, I don't know, Singer, come on, you guys aren't going to do anything. But they're making it work. Funny enough, though, that CEO who came up with these big sweeping changes and ideas, he's not with the company anymore. The CEOs come and go with these big companies. I swear they don't last more than 5 years, but they have a different CEO. But the owner of the company, the new owner of the company, he's determined to fix the problems that with Singer. So the first thing that they did is they they stopped using the manufacturer that they had been using for a long time to manufacture their sewing machines. Singer is a funny company that they're like a few companies out there who are just a name, who don't actually manufacture. And Singer is definitely one of those companies who does not manufacture Singer sewing machines. They manufacture other things, but not Singer sewing machines. But they work with companies and they tell them, this is what we want, this is the price point, this is how we want it to be, and stuff. So anyway, they said, we're done with this company that we're working with. They are not making good products. They failed. So they left the companies that they had been working with for many decades, and now they brought on a brand new company. They actually have a few different companies, but there's one company in particular that is manufacturing most of their machines, and it's an interesting company. They have a very funny name, but a lot of companies work with them. they make the modern Burnett's that Bernina sells. They make machines for just about everybody, but they're a good manufacturer of sewing machines. So Singer is working with them, tells them exactly what they want their specs for, and Singer's pulling it around. This is a long story. My point of it is not that Singer's making a comeback, but it is that this iconic style that we see on these antique sewing machines is a part of their new launch, their new coming back into the sewing world. So when you look at modern Singer sewing machines, you'll see them places like Target and Walmart and Amazon. You don't see them in dealerships very, very often, but Joann's you would see them. All of the Singer sewing machines that have this more iconic shape to them, that violin shape, that is their newest product with their brand new manufacturer, and it's actually quite good for the price. For the price, they're quite good. They're still entry level machines, but boy, are they a lot better than they used to be. But it's that iconic shape that I think is really cool that they brought back because they're getting back to their roots of wanting to do good sewing machines for people again. So yeah, really interesting history with the Singer Sewing Machine Company. That's the machines I have to show you. I can tell you some other history facts about sewing machines a little bit. Janome also has an interesting history of their machines. The name Janome, if you don't know, means eye of the snake, which you go, what does that have to do with sewing machines? Eye of the snake is because Janome was one of the early companies to use a round bobbin and not use the standard long bobbins. That everybody used a long bobbin in the 1800s. Well, Janome didn't. And so the Japanese people thought that the bobbin looked like the eye of a snake. And so then the Janome Sewing Machine Company was their name, Eye of the Snake. So that's a little funny little tidbit of information. But Janome is also linked into New Home, and New Home. So New Home was a company out of New York. Again, a lot of companies came from that part of the world, and it was started with two people. One person's last name was White, and I can't remember his first name, and the other one had a weird German sounding last name. But they started the New Home Sewing Machine Company. It wasn't called New Home initially. I think it was called New England Sewing Machine Company. And so they started this company, and they got to be really popular in building the New England Sewing Machine Company. But then the two partners left. They separated from each other. And then the person whose last name was White started then the White Sewing Machine Company. So White Sewing Machines and the New Home Sewing Machine Company started as the same sewing machine company. And you actually, if you go back in time and you look at their machines, you see that they're practically identical machines under two different names for a long time. But then, things change and things fall apart and stuff. And the White Company built machines for a very long time until Husqvarna bought them, I want to say 40 years ago, and now they're completely dissolved. White doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But then Janome bought the New Home Company a long time ago too. And Janome then adopted the New Home name, and they sold their machines strictly under the New Home name for a long time. So you go back in history, the name Janome wasn't on the machines. It was all New Home sewing machines. And then it got to a point where Janome decided to go away from the New Home name. And now New Home sewing machines are primarily known as Janome sewing machines and not New Home sewing machines. So really interesting. And it's interesting too, I could probably talk another hour about how intermixed all the sewing machine companies are. They're all different companies, but they have this background where they all kind of interweave with each other, either being owned by different sewing machine companies and then parting ways and then coming back to them, or sharing technology. It's really an interesting history with the sewing machine companies, but I won't bore you with that. But I think I probably talked a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're exactly 1 hour.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think I needed that bell. Ding, it's time to stop. Because I know you wanted to do some questions and answers, but I don't know if
Right.
you guys have time for that.
Hang
But
on. Leslie, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Let me go to, I put them on a different document so I can remember them. All right, the first one was, how much did the Wilcox and Gibbs machine cost back in the 1850s?
okay, that's a good one. You could
Oops.
get into Wilcox and Gibb. I can tell you in pounds, because when I looked it up, it was primarily talking about England. But you can get into one between £7 and £15 back then.
Okay. So not terribly expensive. All right, let me go to my questions again.
Yeah, they were fairly affordable. But then when you looked at some of the other sewing machine companies, you could have spent in the later 1800s. You could have spent easily $150 on a really high-end cabinet and machine, which was incredible to think back then that someone would spend that amount of money. But historically, if you go back in time and you account for inflation and all this stuff, people spent a lot of money on a sewing machine back 100 years ago. You think of sewing machines now, people are all over. People think all you sewers think, okay, sewing machines are expensive. But the average person thinks sewing machines are very cheap because they go and they see cheap sewing machines everywhere. But when you go back into, say, the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and you figure out what they would have paid for a brand new Singer sewing machine back then, and then you adjust for inflation, I think the average sewing machine would have been equivalent to a few $1,000s back then.
Yeah, so the thing that I understand that Singer, how they really hit the market was they had a buy on sort of installment plan deal. So women could afford to buy them.
Singer was very forward thinking when it comes to, they were, like I said, they weren't necessarily the best sewing machine made in the time, but the company was run extremely well. And things like payment plans, yeah, that was really, really forward thinking. They also did something, I think a little controversial with their dealerships. And they did this for a very long time. If you went into a Singer dealership, say 50 years ago, and you had a competitive brand machine and you wanted to buy a brand new shiny Singer sewing machine because it rewound the thread and the bobbin and all these great things, and you traded in your whatever, your Elna or something, they would never resell that machine. That machine was destroyed. They would never resell a competitive brand sewing machine. They would take them in and that was it for them. The life of that machine is now over because it is not a Singer sewing machine.
Okay. Let's see, Terry wrote, I have a Mercedes sewing machine. Did Mercedes make this sewing machine a while ago?
Oh, that's very cool. I've never seen a Mercedes sewing machine. I would be curious on what vintage it is. I would say if it was made in the 1960s, I would say they did not. If we're talking about a machine that is really old, I don't know because I've never seen one. But it's interesting in the 1960s and 70s, Japanese companies were really popular for building sewing machines, and they built all those like really heavy duty tanks. I call them tanks. There's just machines that never die. But the Japanese were trying to appeal to Americans and Europeans with their sewing machines because we didn't typically want to buy Japanese products back in that time period. So almost all of those machines would have some sort of name that generically sounded either European or it sounded American. They did that across the board on all those Japanese built machines. So I don't know. I don't know the answer.
So this is a question about commercial machines and home machines. When did commercial or home machines first come? I guess it's when did they hit the markets?
Well, I mean, they both kind of did around the same time. As soon as the invention of the sewing machine happened, there was commercial applications. It was initially more commercial than home, because when the sewing machine was first invented, it was invented with the mind of a simpler device for tailors, speed up production and things like that. So it was kind of at the exact same time, really, but I would say commercial would have been a little bit first, but we're going back to mid 1800s.
Okay, so there's a question from earlier in your presentation. John, is the vertical feed system similar to the German Adlers?
No.
Okay, that's easy. And one more question. Let me go back to my questions. What was the model number of the old fiddle-based Singer? I guess you showed a few of those, and that was earlier on.
Yeah, the really old one, I have no idea. There's no identifiers on it whatsoever. Completely worn away. This one is. Oh, you know, this one, I don't know the model number on this one, but I know I dated it based on the serial number, and that is what got me to the 1889, I believe. I was thinking that there's a stamp on the bottom of a B, and I was thinking that might have been some sort of identifier. The problem with Singer sewing machines is they didn't typically put their model number on their machines. They put the model number on their instruction book. So then you would have, so then when you have one of these old Singers, it takes, I think, a lot of research to figure out exactly what it is. But I was thinking it could be B, but then all the research I did came up with nothing on that. But Singers are really easy to date because of their serial numbers on the back. So this serial number predates lettering, because Singer sewing machines have letters before their numbers as part of their serial number, and that's how you date them. So, but you can date them pre-letters, and so this one's pre-lettered. It has a serial number of 8,428,000 something. And so when you go and you look up that, it tells you this machine was manufactured in 1889. But this one I don't know. This one I have absolutely no clue.
Okay, thank you. Lots of thank yous, great presentations, lots of kudos there. So I think that is the end of the questions.
Well, John, I want to thank you.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Oh, good. You never know if people like to listen to my ramblings about old sewing machines, but if anybody ever comes in and wants to talk old sewing machines, I've got a lot of other really cool ones. I wish I could have drug over. I have a really cool old, it's huge, Singer machine used for making shoes, a cobbler's machine. That is, I think, one of the more interesting ones, but it's in a big stand and it weighs a ton, and I wasn't going to drag that thing over here, but I love showing it anyway. So if you guys ever make it in, I'd be happy to show it to you. And I look forward to seeing everybody again, filling our classroom once COVID's over. We'll get there one of these days, and I hope everybody stays safe. We're doing everything we can on our end here to make sure that anybody who walks in the door, it's good. But this world's a scary place. Yeah. So hopefully everybody stays safe, and we'll all get through this.
Okay.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to
Sherry.
stop the recording now.